Relations between Algeria and France are at an all-time low, as the Algerian regime, led by President Lamine Zeroual, has called home its ambassador to France. The row was sparked as French President François Mitterrand proposed a European conference on the Algerian crisis, based on a peace platform which includes Algerian opposition politicians. The platform, including the outlawed Islamic Salvation Front, wants to negotiate a ceasefire and install a transitional government leading to free elections. Algeria termed Mitterrand's proposal as interference. The row comes as Algeria's Islamic militants step up their war against the government. 30,000 people have been killed in the last 3 years, since the Islamic Salvation Front were deprived of a near-certain electoral victory. Franco-Algerian relations took a nosedive in December as the two governments clashed over the hostage crisis. The armed Islamic group hijacked an Air France jet and threatened to kill all passengers on board. France thus has a vested interest in resolving the conflict in its former colony. 26 French people have been killed in Algeria since September '93, when the extremists began to target foreign nationals.
Finance ministers from the Group of 7 industrialized nations have issued a warning to Russia. They say they are worried about the surge in inflation and the damage the war in Chechnya is doing to its budget. The G7 is strongly encouraging the Russian government to keep to its market reform program, an objective that can only be reached if it comes to some kind of a credit arrangement with the International Monetary Fund. At the end of their constructive 2-day meeting in Toronto, the G7 also endorsed this week's US-led emergency aid package for Mexico.
Chechen independence fighters have shot down a Russian fighter plane just outside the Chechen capital of Grozny, the first time one such plane has been brought down. A Russian TV camera crew shot this footage of the plane's remains. The body of the dead pilot was taken away. Russian troops are still shelling Chechen positions as part of the campaign to bring the rebel republic back under Moscow's control. The plane's destruction is a coup for the Chechen forces, who've been fighting the Russians for the last 2 months against increasingly worse odds. The United States has imposed its largest trade sanctions ever against China.
Today I'm ordering the imposition of 100% tariffs on over $1 billion of imports of Chinese products into the United States.
U.S. Trade Representative Mickey Cantor said the sanctions are a result of China's unwillingness to curb piracy. He showed an example of pirated computer software America says is being produced in Chinese factories, along with illegal reproductions of American films and other products. The sanctions will come into effect on February 26th if no accord has been reached. China warned it will retaliate, restricting American imports and impeding U.S. investment plans. French socialists have chosen Lionel Jospin as a rival to right-wing favourite Prime Minister Edouard Balladur in upcoming presidential elections. First results of the ballot among the socialists' 100,000 members showed Jospin's defeat of Henri Emmanuelli, the current party head. Jospin, a former socialist chief, pledged to end the bickering that has plagued the party since Jacques Delors, who was tipped to win, refused to run. However, polls show any socialist candidate lagging well behind Balladur. Britain's Prime Minister has expressed antagonism to the EU's plan for a single currency in order to appease Eurosceptics in his Conservative Party. John Major said his government would suggest new criteria.
We cannot accept that sterling should be part of a single currency in 96. I will tell you my fear. Unless economic conditions were right, a single currency would tear the European Union apart. And by the right economic conditions, the government does not only mean the Maastricht criteria. They are a necessary but not a sufficient condition to justify a single currency.
Germany has called for the creation of a new transatlantic agenda that would transcend the NATO alliance. It follows a similar call from France and would bind Europe and North America in a tight partnership to ensure world stability. German Defense Minister Volker Ruhe said Europe and America should coordinate their foreign and security policy more comprehensively than is allowed by the existing security cooperation. He said it was a matter of agreeing common political objectives and strategies for handling basic questions. NATO political leaders got their first look at the alliance's new units in eastern Germany on Friday when German forces staged mock air and land attacks on an imaginary enemy.
The aftermath of Malta's worst industrial disaster ever. 9 workers were killed and at least 20 injured when a Libyan chemical tanker in a dry dock in Malta exploded on Friday night. The blast was caused by a buildup of gas in the ship's hold. The explosion split the 3,000-ton tanker in two, trapping workers who were repairing the ship in the wreckage. Rescue teams worked through the night to free people and to prevent fire spreading. The president of Malta, in Rome for a meeting with the Pope, has cut short his stay to return to the island.
Smoking soft drugs is still illegal in France and can lead to between 2 and 12 months in prison if caught. As is the case in many other countries, the debate over whether to legalise drugs such as cannabis and marijuana is alive and kicking. A commission appointed by the French government to study whether to legalise soft drugs for personal use is split on the issue. The commission, composed of doctors, sociologists and policemen, failed to make a recommendation because of the lack of unanimity. Those in favour of legalisation said courts rarely convicted users nowadays and even more rarely jailed them. Those opposed argued that while only 5 to 10% of soft drug users went on to harder drugs, they would not have done so if they hadn't started with soft drugs in the first place. The 14th Imagina Festival has finished in Monte Carlo. Dedicated to 3D computer animation and virtual reality, the festival closed with the presentation of the Pixel Prizes. Among the 9 prize winners was Sleepy Guy, which took the award for Best Fiction Animation. It shows how 3D computer animation has become a form of artistic expression, along with the other traditional forms. Special effects have continued to have their place in filmmaking. By combining 3D computer animation with reality, they've come up with something new. Les Citadines won the category for Best Simulation. Car maker Renault provided models which were superimposed onto a realistic background to produce this special effect. Of the 9 prizes, 6 went to Europeans. What you're looking at now was produced by Belgians and took the prize for Best TV Generic. The remaining 3 prizes went to the United States. "50 years ago, the leaders of Britain, the United States and the Soviet Union got together in the unknown Crimean town of Yalta for an unprecedented meeting. Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin drew up a document that would determine the shape of post-war Europe. It was then that it was decided that Germany would be divided into 4 occupied zones. France, which wasn't invited to the conference, would have control over one of the zones. The Americans would have another. Britain and the USSR would control the other 2. It was decided that Germany would be demilitarized and would have to pay damages to other countries. The main aim of the Yalta Conference was to maintain stability in Europe after the defeat of the Nazis. The United Nations Assembly was set up as a result. The Declaration for a Free Europe also had the goal of helping set up freely elected governments. However, Yalta didn't foresee the later Cold War division of Europe into East and West.
The next bulletin on Euronews in